Hello. I just wanted to look again at the quadrants in this video and what you might call the intra-quadrant relationships, i.e. the relationships between archetypes that are adjacent to each other and share the same elements but in different orders. And also it's a particular consideration of the question, which is when so many of the other relationships in the wheel seem to be so much more powerful, um, why would the intra-quadrant relationships be important? And I think there are two possible answers to that I can think of. One is that um, the intra-quadrant relationships are a gauge of general health rather than a cause of it. Yeah. So, for instance, the patriarch and the nymph will be kind of close to each other and in good relationship to each other if other things are good. Yeah. So that's one thing. But the other thing is that it's possible to say that these are almost like the kind of glue that hold various good relationships together, almost like the sort of like subatomic forces uh, that hold all sorts of stuff together, and maybe aren't as obvious as things like gravity, you know. So those are the two sorts of things that I'd go on. But let's have a quick look at this actually. So let's just focus on patriarch and nymphal child again, because it's kind of like it's an easy one to just focus on and to stick to the same one just to keep on illustrating. Now you can see that in terms of well, look, aren't other things so much more powerful? Well, yes, they are very powerful. For instance, you can tell. Look, the nymph is definitely helped tremendously by the matriarch. Yeah, it's a tremendous relationship. The patriarch is definitely helped tremendously by the fool. It's a great relationship. You can see that. Also, um, as Brent Bruning pointed out, like for instance, nymph over to hearth priestess, child to queen. This is a very powerful relationship as well, because they've got everything that each other needs in terms of the elements to make a complete picture in terms of the elements. But it's not as challenging as it would with their sort of like their absolute polar opposite in terms of the other gender, yeah, i.e. nymph with warrior, yeah, or patriarch with hearth priestess. So you can see that it's very good. You know, the hearth priestess has got earth first, water first. Earth and water really help each other. Hearth priestess, fire second, nymph, air second. Air and fire really help each other. And there's no conflict really between them. So you can see, yes, that's also very, very powerful. And these things do work and they do come into play. Yeah, most definitely. Now, what about the intra quadrant relationships though? Well, so patriarch and nymph is again air first, water second, water first, air second. Obviously they've got exactly the same elements but in different orders. So that would suggest that there's a compatibility and an understanding between them. Yeah, they don't hold the ultimate keys for each other, if you see what I mean. But there's an understanding. There's a potential ease there. Now the other thing is, if we, for instance, look at second element as being the one that's kind of like inside the archetype, and then first element as being the way that they really express and what we see, then you could say that the core of the nymph is already being expressed by the patriarch, and the core of the patriarch is already being expressed by the nymph. Yeah, and so other things being equal, they're going to have a potentially very mutually supportive relationship at a very simple level, I think. And if you think about it, it's even reflected in all sorts of things in life, you know, because going back to this as the child, say, what does a child need? You know, a child always wants to be know that it's a good child. It wants to know it's being good, yeah, because that means it's being loved, etc., etc. So you could see, and how does the child know it's being good? Well, the patriarch is basically the definition of goodness, essentially, because it's got the air and the water to be able to actually formulate what that is, to formulate what ethical goodness is, and to be able to express that in the ways that a child can and understand. So you see, you've got this relationship here. At the same time, the patriarch, obviously, to be able to do what he does, he needs to have somewhere inside him, he needs that emotional openness and serenity, or capacity for imagination that the child has. He needs the innocence of the child to be able to really approach his intellectual questions and ethical and moral questions with complete honesty. So they need each other. If we look down to other ones, like for instance here, the hearth priestess and the warrior. Now, I'm not sure what we would say about this. And I could see that the hearth priestess needs to feel that she is wanted, basically, and the warrior is an archetype that wants stuff. Yeah. So you could see that these two have it. Now the other thing is the warrior needs to know that he is worthy of having stuff. there's a funny situation here going on there. She really wants to feel wanted. He really wants to know that he's worth having things, if you see what I mean, or people. Yeah. So there's that sort of you can see that sort of a relationship here. Actress, she needs to know that she's an individual, and that she has some sort of creative value, because that's something that she really needs. Now the fool, what does the fool need from the actress? What does the fool really need? He does need a kind of appreciation as well. He needs the sense of appreciation. He needs to know that his extraordinary performance, in a sense, well, that's sounding more actressy. He needs to know that his extraordinary expression is actually seen and recognized. Yeah, I guess that will be one thing there. And she still needs to know that she is creative. Yeah, she needs to know that she's creative. Yeah. While he needs to know that his creativity is actually seen. Matriarch and Sage. Oh, what do we say about Matriarch and Sage? What do we say about Matriarch and Sage? How would they be? How do they, if we think about just everyday life and everything, how do they show their mutual supportiveness? Well, the matriarch really needs his clarity. She really needs to have clarity, because it's air on the inside of her. So she needs clarity. She needs clarity to not get sort of silted up in all the mundane details of life. And he needs to finally see that his serenity has some relevance, in a sense, that his meditation, and that his enlightenment, in a sense, that his enlightenment actually has a purpose, a practical purpose, rather like the whole sort of bodhisattva idea. Yeah. So you can see that they again do, and that one was a bit more difficult for me to see, but you do see it there. Yeah. So anyway, that's just a very, very brief look at a kind of common sense look at how the quadrants, the intra-quadrant relationships work out just in ordinary life. But I think the thing is that they are either an indication of the general health of the relationships within the whole, or you could also look at them as being a sort of very simple sort of like glue or lubrication, different directions, that kind of gets the whole thing to just work better at a certain level, which means that it can actually be healthier and have the health manifest. That's how I think I'd look at it.